So today we're taking a look at the Satsuma again, simply because I had a really good game and I just had to share it with you guys. I really do enjoy the Satsuma a lot. This is easily one of my favorite battleships in the entire game. Really, it shouldn't be much of a surprise thanks to the funny button or the special combat instructions. Getting yourself one really accurate salvo in a battleship is amazing. It's one of the best feelings in the game. It allows you to almost get rid of the RNG for at least one salvo. And of course, when we're in the Satsuma, we're going to try and save that for the highest impact salvo we possibly can. So early game, sure, we're going to just farm up our buff. It's okay if we don't even hit. It's very nice in this game in particular that the carrier is spotting for us. That allows us to farm our buff pretty early. You're going to notice that I'm actually not going to use it for a little bit. That's really what you should be doing in the Satsuma. A lot of you probably already do this, but if you don't, definitely be saving it for a very high impact salvo. Don't use it on an angled ship or a very long range battleship or anything like that. It's really not going to go that well. You should be looking for those high impact radar cruisers or perhaps maybe a carrier. If you do manage to get one in range, it's always going to be a nice shot to get. We're going to take it slow this game, though. With carriers, of course, we do have to play a little bit passive. And here, in this case, our team is slowly pushing through into the A-cap. And I don't really want to lead the charge. The Satsuma can definitely get overwhelmed, so we are going to play a little bit passive. Already have 600,000 potential damage, and that's going to go up pretty quickly here. Can't even hit the Satsuma, apparently. So yeah, it is very nice to have that accuracy buff every once in a while. And it really is one of the main reasons I like to recommend the Japanese battleship line. I used to do it before the super ships were released as well. The Yamato is a great tier 10, and it really teaches you the fundamentals of battleships if you're a newer player playing through the Japanese line. But having the Satsuma here at the end as that final reward is pretty awesome. It's one of the main frustrations I think a lot of battleship players have, is that inaccuracy or random chance to the salvos when you feel like you should be getting at least a little more damage on some of those broadside close range targets. Then maybe a bug lands all the shells short, or you just get poor RNG and you just manage to miss most of your shot. This way, we're at least having a few good salvos in the game, almost guaranteed. Part of me wishes I could see that on a few other ships. I think that would be very nice. I think some of the inconsistency on battleships sometimes a little frustrating. And one of the main reasons I really enjoy playing destroyers in this game. Last week playing the Holland, getting into some of those knife fight brawls, there's a lot of consistency there that I can count on. There's not a lot of RNG. It comes down to skill a lot of the time. And I really, really do enjoy that as well. So that's why it's nice to play a variety. And then we can always just play as Satsuma at the end of the day and deal with some of that inconsistency again. You'll notice I still haven't used this buff. We are nearing the 4-minute mark here, or just 4 minutes in, and I still haven't used it. But that's because we save it. We save it for opportunities. Like this one, we save it for opportunities. Like if that Edgar had been spotted, probably would have gone for that as well. It's the kind of salvos that you'd be frustrated if you missed or didn't get at least a decent chunk of damage. That's what you save it for. And, you know, if you get good accuracy, that sometimes happens. Even with this buff, you're not guaranteed to dev strike a carrier off the rip, but it sure is nice when you do. And sometimes leading targets at those longer ranges can be a little bit tricky, and that's where that aiming guide from all those years ago is still pretty good. The video itself probably could do with an update as far as quality and voiceover goes, but what I'm talking about in there is often very useful even today. Specifically when it comes to the Smart Horizon crosshair, a dynamic crosshair that actually works. Unfortunately, the base game, the vanilla game, the dynamic crosshair doesn't actually do anything dynamic. You have to use these mods to actually get it to change. And really the best part about it is it tells you how to lead someone who's going exactly 30 knots broadside onto you. There are things you have to do to compensate for that. Not every ship is 30 knots. Sometimes they'll be maneuvering, but that's what it is all about. It makes aiming at these long ranges pretty easy. If they are broadside onto you around 30 knots, You just lead like the number of seconds it takes for the shells to get there. You just put the enemy ship on that number, and it pretty much does the leading for you. That's what the really powerful part about these dynamic crosshairs is. Not a lot of guessing. Unfortunately, it still is a mod. This has been years at this point that the dynamic base crosshair hasn't really done anything, and that's kind of disappointing. It would have been nice to see Wargaming implement this feature at some point, because it really is necessary to lead at longer ranges. They've already done some of the benefits to leading at longer ranges, and that's the X on the minimap. It usually appears as a circle in the base game, but the modded minimap I have puts it as an X. Not really a huge change, but that gives you a great way to lead vertically. It kind of tells you where to put your crosshair. If somebody's turning out or slightly angled away from you, gets you lined up nicely on their broadside. So if they were to add dynamic crosshair, I think that would be really, really good for everyone. That way you don't need a mod for it. And that's not even just for Battleship players. It really helps me a lot while I'm playing some destroyers and cruisers, especially at longer ranges. Their smaller shells can get pretty floaty, and you want to have as much DPM on target as possible, even out to those extended ranges. Ships like Marceau and Colbert are pretty extreme examples of that, where it's pretty difficult to lead at those longer ranges. And again, this dynamic crosshair helps a ton in that case. I think it would do a lot for the player base, although I don't know. It's been so long that we haven't had an actual functioning dynamic crosshair that it seems like it's just not really going to happen at this point. But it would be nice. But if you don't have it yet, definitely go download one. I think ModStation should have some of those dynamic crosshairs if you're not wanting to use Aslans, which is a bit of a community mod loader. The ModStation one is more officially supported by Wargaming, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked into the differences between those two, but that is definitely a way you can get better at the game, just simply by adding a few of those mods that help you to lead at those longer ranges. Because I get it, it can definitely be difficult to know where you should be leading depending on the target at these extreme ranges we see in super ships. And I don't really see the ranges getting any shorter, especially at high tier. It seems like all of the super ships are just really good out to really long ranges, and anything new that they add to the game kind of has to fit that mold, at least in the super ships tier. So if you are planning on grinding up to these super ships and spending all the credits, because they are a massive credit sink, definitely trying to get used to these longer ranges. And you'll see even in this game here, where it looks like we're getting into a bit of a blowout, not a lot of surprise. Carriers are a pretty massive impact to the game. Be missing one of those is pretty tough for a team to come back from. We're seeing most of our salvos at pretty far range, since we really didn't have the opportunity in those late game scenarios where there's not many ships left, where people do decide to push in a little bit more. We do manage to catch this Alaska's broadside here, fortunately, and well, that's a little disappointing. Certainly compared to the CV salvo earlier on, definitely expecting or hoping for a little bit more there. But unfortunately, not every ship is a great target for this funny button or these combat instructions for accuracy. Alaska has a waterline or almost below waterline citadel, making it almost impossible to hit. And there's a few other ships like that in the game where it's almost not even worth using your combat instructions on, just because it's so unlikely to get a devastating salvo in on them. That's okay. We still did great, and that salvo into the carrier really made my night while I was playing this one. So I just had to share that with you. And we only needed 4 shells to kill the carrier outright. 4 out of 8. So half of our salvo didn't even do damage in that one. Just really blessed accuracy, even factoring in the combat instructions. As for the build here on the Satsuma, I really haven't changed it recently. We're still going for accuracy, reload of course. You can see propulsion mod here sometimes helping us dodge some salvos. Early game, we certainly made use of that, racked up quite a bit of potential damage. On the commander, certainly hopeful skill here at manual secondaries. Really not all that recommended, but I do love having it for those rare games that I can push in a little bit and make use of them. Emergency repair expert would certainly be a much more useful skill most of the time. Running a pretty standard build then with concealment and fire prevention, and emergency repair expert would be the way to go. Adrenaline rush is awesome, of course, basic survivability, Because the turrets are so slow, grease the gears here is always going to be great on any of these high-tier Japanese ships, specifically the battleships. But even the DDs and cruisers don't have the best turret traverse, except for the Yoda, which somehow is really fast. But Zhao is pretty slow, Shim is pretty slow as well. So there we go. The Satsuma again. Try not to post only this ship on the channel, but when I do get those special games, or in this case, a very special salvo, I had to share it with you. So I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.